Richard Sell is a rare lithographer. Despite new technology, he still enjoys working the traditional way. What's the appeal of printmaking?
I started printing in a way for a silly reason, because I didn't like getting rid of my pictures. The other reason is that it's such an extraordinarily versatile medium. As long as you've got a greasy mark on that stone, you're there, you can do anything. The qualities of lithography that appeal to me are, in the main, two things, I think. The first is that it allows you to draw, and I feel that drawing is absolutely fundamental. The second is that it has, for me particularly, a considerable affinity with watercolor. And I've always been a watercolor or graphics man rather than an oil painter. So the feeling that you get with lithography, with the rather transparent inks overprinting one on the other, and the combination of that with drawing, give me a great deal of freedom, and it's what I like about it.
The process itself is a complex and lengthy one, demanding a lot of preparation. Richard describes how he begins a new print.
The idea for a new print can start in all sorts of ways. In this instance, the print of Wood Cottage, I was very intrigued by the repetition of rectangles, of the open doors, the light and dark bands between windows and rooms and dark passageways, and in this case, the regularity of all this and the absolutely lunatic wallpaper. Now, the working drawing is simply this. This is what I came away with. And in my head, I had the colors, which are more or less those. In the end, the print took charge and said more or less what it wanted to do. And you can see from this that the finished print is entirely unlike the working drawing, because I've used lithographic technique, and it simply comes out as a thing on its own. Right, now this is both the end of the process and the beginning. The end in that the old work has to be ground off, and the beginning in that you're resurfacing the stone ready for the next work to come on it.
To produce one print, a number of stones are required, each containing different visual information. In turn, they're overprinted to build up the picture.
The stone that is used is almost pure limestone. It is called Kelheim stone, and it comes from Solnhofen in Bavaria. And it used to be quarried until relatively recently, and it has the property of coming away in flat slabs, which are almost without fault, and it absorbs grease and it absorbs water slightly, so that the image on a stone is always stronger than the image on a plate, which is only held by surface tension. Lithography started off with Senefelder, who lived in Bavaria. This was 1797 or so, and he was trying to publish his own plays cheaply and finding a way of printing them. And other people besides him were working on stones, experimenting, and in 1798 he was working in his workshop, and his mother came in with a laundry list, and he hadn't got any paper to hand, so he wrote it down on the stone with his greasy ink. And then he thought, well, I wonder if I can print that. And he tried at first in slight relief, not thinking that it would work lithographically, and then he tumbled to it that the grease and water principle would work. And from there on, he developed the process, and he was obviously a very good amateur chemist and a most ingenious bloke, because the technique as he left it is pretty well what I'm doing now.
The picture is produced on a flat surface by drawing greasy marks, which would accept ink in some areas, and protecting others with gum. But first, the complete image is placed on the stones.
Now, what you've just seen is getting the key tracing onto the stone. It has all the information in the drawing, whether I need it or not, so that I can pick out what I want for the relevant colour. And that's a little bit faint, but it's clear enough. I started lithography just after the war at Chelsea, and I studied under Harold Jones. He illustrated quite a number of nursery rhyme books and books of verses, and was a very fine lithographer. Then it got crowded out of my timetable and I went to the Central School and studied under Edwin Liddell and two technicians particularly, Tom and Ernest Devonish, and I really owe them an enormous debt because they were tremendous on getting you out of any lithographic trouble that you cared to fall into.
Printing reverses the image, so to get the final print the right way round, Richard draws on the stone from a mirror image of the original sketch. This second stone is to bear the architectural details of York Minster. The marks can be made with chalk or ink and applied with a pen or a brush. Finally, Richard protects the rest of the stone from ink with gum arabic, ready for the addition of texture.
Now, this is the last of the gumming out on the actual drawing. The idea being to stop the stone receiving any more work, except where I want it to, because the next stage will be a spatter, and that's liable to go anywhere, and I don't want it coming on these gummed bits. The ink that I shall use will be mixed up with turps. Right, now I'll just test that so that I don't get too much of a mess. That's it. Now then, we can splatter that texture over. That having been done, we can put the first etch on, which is simply gum arabic with a very little nitric acid in. Goes over quite generously on the stone, and you'll see now that the gummed out lines that I drew on here are beginning to appear as clean. The work is lifting off because of the underlying gum. Now what's happening here is that we've got the complete image and it's had gum over it overnight, and now the black pigment is no longer relevant. All we want is the grease in the stone, so out comes the black pigment ready to be rolled up. And so what I do is to start now with water mixed into my turps. The water will melt away the remaining gum, and the turps goes on cleaning out the pigment. Take a moment or two to melt the gum down, but it's going now, all right? Harold Jones, who taught me this process, I'm sorry to say, teased a girl student by making her believe that the image had disappeared when she got to this stage, and she thought all her work had been undone and burst into tears. But of course it was perfectly all right, in fact, because she'd got the grease in the stone and was ready to roll up in ink. And all was well, but I always remember that. It was rather a tease. Now I'm ready for the roller. Here it is, beginning to come up quite nicely. Obviously on its best party behaviour. Now I think I'm ready there to take a proof. This is simply newsprint for proofing purposes. Then the backing paper, which takes up any slack in the pressure. Tympan comes down. Bed goes in under the scraper that gives it pressure. Switch off and just pull it out the rest of the way. And now is the moment of truth when we see how well the work's come up. And that is not at all too bad.
Once each stone is proofed to his satisfaction, Richard is ready to roll on his chosen colours and make up a complete original print.
I've barely scratched the beginnings of it. In fact, you might say of a lot of my prints that the technique is rather dull. It served my purpose for the time being, but now that I've got time, I'm looking forward to experimenting very much more. There are all sorts of techniques I haven't used yet.